A passport was born in the Sahel, and within hours the world rushed to bury it. On the second day of February 2025, in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré held in his hands the very first passport of the Alliance of Sahel States. Deep blue stamped with gold, it was meant to be a key. Yet almost instantly, voices declared it a lock. Social media screamed rejection, headlines whispered humiliation, and rumors traveled faster than truth. This is the paradox. A document fully compliant with the International Civil Aviation Organization, yet called invalid. A symbol of sovereignty framed as failure. A continent claiming its right, told again to wait for outside approval. But in that moment, something larger began. The AES passport was never simply paper. It was a seed of defiance, planted in the red soil of the Sahel, daring the world to ask, who decides Africa's legitimacy, its own people or its former overseers? Stay with us, for this is not just about visas and borders. It is about dignity written in leather and ink. Subscribe and walk with us through a story where sovereignty itself is on trial. The story began not in silence, but in thunder. For decades, the citizens of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso traveled with documents issued under regional structures shaped in Paris and Brussels. Those papers carried the weight of permission, not pride. Then came the rupture. In the year 2024, the three nations formally stepped away from ECOWAS and WEMU, organizations they accused of serving external masters rather than sovereign peoples. This departure was more than diplomatic. It stripped millions of their privileged regional travel permits and cast doubt on the ease of movement for students, traders, and families alike. Critics called it reckless. Supporters called it liberation. And so, when the calendar turned to February the 2nd, 2025, Ouagadougou became the stage for a spectacle no one could ignore. Cameras rolled, banners waved, and at the center stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, presenting to the world the very first passport of the Alliance of Sahel States. Its cover was deep blue, embossed with the AES insignia in gold, a color scheme chosen with precision. Blue to echo the sky above the Sahel, gold to reflect the wealth beneath its soil. In that book of pages lay not only biometric chips and eco-compliance, but a declaration: sovereignty does not ask for permission. It asserts itself. Crowds watched as the initial passports were distributed. Farmers in dusty hats, students in crisp shirts, civil servants in their best attire. Each smiled as their names were called. They were not simply receiving papers. They were receiving recognition that they belonged to a union self-made, not a union dictated. The mood was triumphant, yet triumph never goes uncontested. Within hours, the digital battlefield lit up. Posts surged across Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Fake document, one headline sneered. Rejected already, another claimed. A viral video declared the AES passport the shortest lived in history, its captions flashing in multiple languages to ensure maximum reach. Some accounts allege that France had dismissed it outright. Others insisted the European Union's visa system had blocked it, and still others suggested China had refused recognition. The contradictions did not matter. What mattered was speed. A flood of humiliation unleashed before the ink on the first passport was dry. For ordinary citizens scrolling through feeds in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou, the confusion was crushing. How could a passport unveiled before television cameras, hailed as a sovereign achievement, already be invalid? How could their leaders promise international legitimacy if border posts abroad were said to be rejecting it? The uncertainty gnawed at pride. Yet the facts told a different story. Long before the launch, AES officials had worked quietly with the International Civil Aviation Organization to ensure compliance. That meant the document was legally recognized for air travel worldwide. But legality and legitimacy are never the same in the realm of geopolitics. Recognition on paper can be buried by doubt and perception, and so the passport, designed to be a bridge, became a battlefield. The media outside Africa seized the narrative. Western outlets framed the launch not as a milestone of regional integration, but as a question mark over acceptance. Headlines turned curiosity into skepticism, skepticism into dismissal. By the time African broadcasters aired footage of the celebration, the tone had already been set. This was less a triumph, more a controversy. Observers were quick to point out the pattern. Each step the Sahel states had taken toward independence, from Mali's withdrawal from French military missions, to Burkina Faso's nationalization of gold, to Niger's defiance of external diktats, had been met with a storm of disinformation. Each move painted as reckless, each assertion of dignity framed as isolation. The AES Passport was simply the latest chapter. But this time, the stakes were intimate. A passport is not a policy paper or a speech at the United Nations. It is an object carried in the pockets of farmers, students, mothers, and traders. Casting doubt on it meant casting doubt on their very identity. The disinformation did not attack abstract politics. It attacked belonging itself. That is why the rumors traveled so far, so fast. Still, even as falsehoods multiplied, the launch in Ouagadougou remained a living fact. Families lined up to collect their documents, journalists filmed interviews with proud new holders, and leaders spoke of the passport as a seed of integration. It was not a retreat from history, but a planting of something new. And seeds once planted do not vanish simply because detractors declare them dead. They wait beneath the soil, gathering strength, ready to sprout when the conditions allow. The AES Passport, unveiled with ceremony and mocked with venom, stood as both symbol and target. Its first day was both a birth and a battle. And from that very moment, one question echoed louder than the rumors. Who would be the first outside power to recognize it, and who would dare to deny it? Every sovereignty project meets its storm, and for the AES Passport, the storm arrived not from airports or border posts, but from narratives. Within hours of its unveiling, the passport had leapt from a document into a debate, from a piece of leather and ink into a lightning rod of geopolitics. The climax unfolded when Western headlines and social media merged into a single chorus of doubt. News tickers in Paris and Brussels asked whether the document would ever be recognized. Viral videos mocked its design as cheap imitation. One particularly venomous post declared, "By the time these pages are stamped, their governments will have collapsed." The aim was clear, not merely to question, but to humiliate. Yet humiliation was not the only story. Inside Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, ordinary citizens responded with resilience. In Bamako, queues stretched outside municipal offices as people sought information on applications. In Niamey, young students filmed themselves proudly displaying their new passports online, captioned with defiant phrases, "Our dignity, our document." In Ouagadougou, radio hosts described the moment as the first breath of true independence. For every tweet of dismissal abroad, there was a voice of pride at home. The governments of the Sahel states did not retreat into silence. Officials convened press conferences emphasizing that the passport had been designed according to International Civil Aviation Organization standards, the same standards used by Europe, America, and Asia. Compliance with ICAO meant the document was technically valid from day one. Legally speaking, no country could claim otherwise. But legality does not automatically silence skepticism. This was not only about law, it was about perception, power, and narrative. Observers quickly noted the echo of earlier crises. When Mali expelled French troops, rumors of impending collapse spread faster than fact. When Burkina Faso nationalized parts of its gold sector, headlines warned of economic disaster. When Niger resisted foreign pressure, think tanks predicted isolation. In each case, the actual outcomes were more complex, yet the narrative of doom had dominated. The AES passport controversy was no different. Another attempt to paint sovereignty as folly. But if the accusations felt familiar, the emotional stakes were sharper. A passport touches the daily lives of millions. To declare it invalid was to declare citizens illegitimate travelers, outsiders in their own skin. It was no longer a debate over policy. It was a direct assault on the people's right to belong. That is why the disinformation cut so deep and spread so fast. The intensity of the backlash reached its peak when rumors claimed that France had issued an outright rejection. Memes circulated of AES travelers turned away at borders, even though no such incidents were confirmed. Some clips were staged, using unrelated footage of airport disputes repackaged with new captions. Fact-checkers later traced many of these viral pieces to accounts operating outside the Sahel, coordinated across multiple languages. This was no accident. It was narrative warfare, deliberate, systematic, and timed to coincide with the passport's birth. The global press, instead of clarifying, often amplified the confusion. By framing the launch as a controversy rather than a milestone, Western outlets shifted the lens from Africa's achievement to Africa's supposed vulnerability. Headlines asked, "Will anyone accept it?" rather than, "How will this transform mobility in the Sahel?" The framing itself carried weight. It implied that African sovereignty projects could only be judged by external validation, never by their own merit. Inside the Sahel, this framing provoked both anger and determination. Commentators on local television denounced the colonial reflex of questioning African legitimacy by default. Religious leaders spoke of the passport as a shield of independence. University students debated its symbolism in lecture halls, describing it as the book that carries our freedom. Even in the face of mockery, the emotional resonance of the passport grew stronger. And so the paradox of the moment became unavoidable. On the one hand, the passport was fully legal, anchored in international regulations. On the other hand, it was attacked as useless, rejected, invalid. Between these two poles stretched the battlefield of legitimacy. The drama was no longer about biometric chips or database codes. It was about dignity. That is why the launch, intended as a calm declaration, transformed into a climax of conflict. Never had a simple travel document sparked such a cascade of disinformation, doubt, and debate. Never had a book of pages been forced to carry so much political weight so quickly. The AES Passport had been born into fire. Yet fire can forge as well as consume. Citizens who lined up in Bamako and Niamey knew they were part of something larger than paperwork. They were part of a moment when sovereignty was no longer a speech or a promise, but an object that could be held, carried, and shown. Still, one question lingered above the smoke. If the passport was truly valid, how would it reshape daily life and politics across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in the months to come? The storm of rumors eventually gave way to a quieter, more enduring question. What did the AES passport mean for the lives of ordinary people? For farmers, merchants, students, and families, sovereignty is not measured in speeches or summits. It is measured in the weight of a document carried in a pocket, the stamp in a book that allows a journey, the dignity of being recognized abroad. In the days following the launch, municipal offices in Bamako reported long lines of citizens eager to apply. Many still held older ECOWAS passports, technically valid until expiry. Yet they came anyway, driven not by convenience but by pride. To carry the AES passport was to carry proof that their states had broken free from imposed structures. A farmer in Ségou told a local journalist, "This is not just for travel. This is for my children to know we decide for ourselves." His sentiment echoed across the Sahel. But pride did not erase practical difficulties. In the short term, applicants faced uncertainty at foreign consulates. European visa centers, slow to update their systems, often placed AES passports into manual review. Travelers were asked to return later or to fill additional forms. What to some clerks appeared as technical backlog, to citizens felt like suspicion. Each delay reminded them that sovereignty on paper does not always translate to respect in practice. Domestically, the passport became a powerful political tool. Leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States spoke of it as a daily symbol of unity. In Niamey, banners proclaimed, "One passport, one people." In Ouagadougou, state media called it the leather shield of independence. And in Bamako, commentators linked it directly to the wider revolution of dignity sweeping the region since 2022. That revolution had seen soldiers step into politics, regimes shift, and the name of Ibrahim Traoré etched into headlines as a figure of defiance. For critics abroad, it was described as the Ibrahim Traoré coup. For supporters at home, it was the beginning of a new chapter where sovereignty meant action, not rhetoric. The passport was presented as the continuation of that chapter. In the political sphere, the AES passport also functioned as a glue binding three fragile states together. Each of the members faced insurgency, economic pressure, and external sanctions. Alone, they were vulnerable. Together, they projected resilience. The passport, modest in size, carried disproportionate weight as a symbol of that resilience. It said to the world, "We may be landlocked, but we are not locked out." Economically, the effects were twofold. On one hand, critics worried about reduced mobility within ECOWAS, fearing that workers from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger would lose access to regional labor markets. On the other hand, the AES leadership argued that their own passport could become the nucleus of a new integration zone, encouraging trade corridors across the Sahel and reinforcing ties with partners like Algeria, Guinea, and even non-African allies. By placing their sovereignty into a shared document, they invited new negotiations on equal terms. Security, too, was part of the calculation. For years, the Sahel had been portrayed internationally as a belt of instability, rife with insurgencies and migration crises. Issuing a collective passport was therefore a gamble. Would it be mocked as a weakness or embraced as a step toward order? Inside the alliance, officials framed it as a tool of security. A unified document would streamline identification, reduce forgery, and strengthen internal cohesion. If we can defend our skies, one official in Ouagadougou remarked, we must also defend our identities. For the public, the emotional resonance outweighed the technical debates. Citizens shared photographs of themselves holding the passport against backdrops of markets, mosques, and schools. Influencers posted hashtags celebrating sovereignty in my pocket. Each post was a rebuttal to the disinformation campaign. Where rumors sought to instill shame, lived experience generated pride. Still, the medium-term political consequences cannot be ignored. By asserting autonomy in such a visible way, the Sahel states deepened tensions with neighbors still tied to ECOWAS frameworks. Some regional leaders accused the AES of undermining West African integration. Others warned of economic retaliation. Yet for many in the Sahel, these criticisms only reinforced their conviction that sovereignty is never granted freely. It must be claimed, defended, and demonstrated. The question that loomed was whether the AES could maintain this momentum. Would the passport remain a proud token carried by thousands, or would bureaucratic hurdles and external skepticism erode its use over time? The answer depended not only on domestic unity, but also on the reactions of the wider world. And so the scene was set for the next stage of the story. How would global powers, from Europe to China to the African Union, respond to a passport that dared to redefine legitimacy itself? Beyond the borders of the Sahel, the AES passport became a litmus test for how the world views African sovereignty. At the African Union, debates were cautious. Some officials privately worried that the creation of a parallel document outside ECOWAS frameworks risked fragmentation. Others hailed it as a bold precedent, arguing that regional organizations should adapt to the will of their members, not the other way around. The African Union's official statements were measured, but the symbolic weight was undeniable. For the first time in decades, landlocked nations had created a collective instrument of identity without waiting for external approval. Europe, by contrast, stumbled. In the early weeks of February 2025, Schengen consulates faced a bureaucratic dilemma. Their systems still listed ECOWAS passports as valid templates, while the AES document triggered technical errors. Clerks hesitated, applicants waited, and silence from Brussels allowed rumors of rejection to spread unchecked. Though no formal refusal policy was ever issued, the perception of hesitation carried its own sting. Commentators noted the disparity. When Europe updates its own documents, others adapt instantly. When Africa does the same, it is met with suspicion and delay. This asymmetry echoed the long history of European control over African mobility. More telling was the uneven response within Europe itself. Countries with deep colonial ties to the Sahel, particularly France, were slowest to issue clarifications. By contrast, nations with less historical baggage, such as Hungary and Poland, quietly began processing visas once their databases were updated. The split revealed that the debate was not merely technical, but historical, a shadow of past empires coloring present decisions. Then came China. Within days of the AES launch, embassies in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou issued clear statements. The new passport was valid, recognized, and accepted. At a press briefing in Beijing, a foreign ministry spokesperson dismissed rumors of rejection as baseless, emphasizing that compliance with International Civil Aviation Organization standards was the only criterion. The clarity stood in sharp contrast to Europe's hesitation. For many in the Sahel, China's recognition was not only procedural but symbolic, an affirmation that African sovereignty did not need to wait for Western blessing. Critics in European think tanks suggested that Beijing's quick endorsement was strategic, designed to expand influence where Western power was shrinking. That analysis may hold some truth. Yet for citizens of the Sahel, motives mattered less than outcomes. They saw a partner treating them with dignity, not delay. The contrast fed into a wider narrative, one already shaping what supporters called the Burkina Faso Revolution. A revolution not of weapons, but of symbols, institutions, and the refusal to bow to external dictates. Thus, the AES passport, intended as an administrative tool, had evolved into a geopolitical mirror. It reflected two competing ways of engaging with Africa. One still entangled in colonial reflexes, the other aspiring to partnership in a multipolar world. And in that mirror lay a question that would define the years to come. Would the future of African integration be shaped by hesitation abroad, or by the determination of Africans themselves? The AES Passport is more than a response to yesterday's doubts. It is a doorway to tomorrow's possibilities. In the Sahel, where borders often cut through ethnic lines and trade routes, the promise of a common document carries profound implications. If fully embraced, it could ease the movement of traders across dusty highways from Gao to Niamey, allow students to study in neighboring capitals without endless paperwork, and signal to the world that integration is not a gift from outside, but a choice from within. Yet every doorway carries both light and shadow. The opportunities are immense. With a single passport, the Alliance of Sahel States can negotiate with external partners as a bloc, rather than as fragmented voices. It can strengthen trade corridors stretching to Algeria in the north and Guinea in the west, building economic resilience beyond the old structures tied to Paris and Brussels. It can inspire other African regions to rethink integration, showing that sovereignty need not be surrendered in order to be shared. But the risks are equally real. The same forces that spread disinformation at the launch will not disappear. They will adapt, seeking to exploit every delay, every glitch, every misunderstanding. If European systems take months to adjust, critics will claim rejection. If consular officers hesitate, rumors of humiliation will resurface. Sovereignty must therefore be defended not only on the battlefield of policy, but in the arena of perception. Security challenges add further weight. The Sahel remains scarred by insurgency, poverty, and fragile governance. A common passport could either reinforce internal unity or become a new target for those who profit from instability. Its success depends on more than technical validity. It depends on whether the AES can maintain cohesion under pressure, resist external sanctions, and deliver tangible benefits to citizens. For the people of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the stakes could not be higher. A passport may seem a small object, yet it carries the power to embody dignity in daily life. Every visa issued abroad, every border crossed with recognition, becomes a quiet victory over decades of dependency. Every citizen carrying the document becomes an ambassador of sovereignty. In the long run, the AES passport might prove to be only the beginning, the seed of broader projects, a shared market, common infrastructure, perhaps even collective defense. Or it might falter under the weight of opposition, remembered only as a bold experiment. The outcome is uncertain. What is certain is that the story does not end here. For as long as the passport exists, it will pose a challenge to the world. Will you recognize a people who choose their own identity, or will you deny them until the day they no longer ask? The AES passport began as paper and ink, yet it quickly transformed into something far greater, a stage where sovereignty itself was tested. It was mocked as a failure, dismissed as a forgery, and doubted by those unwilling to see Africa define legitimacy on its own terms. But every rumor met resistance, every doubt was countered by proof, and every attempt to humiliate only deepened the pride of those who carried it. For citizens of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the passport became more than a travel document. It became a mirror of their struggle, a symbol of belonging, and a shield of independence. In their hands, the story of the Ibrahim Traoré coup was no longer just about soldiers and speeches. It was about dignity sewn into the daily lives of farmers, students, and traders who could now say, "This identity is ours." The controversy revealed a simple truth. Sovereignty is not granted. It is lived. It is carried in leather covers, stamped at borders, and defended against those who whisper rejection. And in that truth lies the heart of the Burkina Faso Revolution, a revolution built not on violence, but on the courage to create institutions without waiting for external blessing. The world may still debate motives, legality, or geopolitics. But for the people of the Sahel, every successful journey with the AES passport is a quiet declaration. Africa will no longer ask for permission to exist. It will prove its legitimacy one citizen at a time. So the question lingers for all who watch this story unfold. If three landlocked nations can redefine their own future, what excuse remains for the rest of the world? If you believe sovereignty matters, stay with us. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and walk with this story as it continues to unfold. For the tale of the Ibrahim Traoré coup is not finished. It is only the beginning of a continent choosing dignity over dependence.